How's that for volume? That's okay there? Yeah, okay. So again, welcome everyone, and great turnout. We've got the mayoral debate going on as well, so we're glad that we drew you here. Absolutely. So I want these two voices to be a little more prominent than mine tonight, because I think they're just two amazing young people. I've known Tanya for 3 years now, and Tomas only for 3 days, but it feels like longer than that already. I had a great opportunity to sit with both of them on Tuesday night with Yvonne, and I want to thank Yvonne and the NCC for having us here this evening also, and it's a real pleasure to be able to join everyone. So I want to start out with just having both Tanya and Tomas tell us a little bit what behind why you're here tonight, and a little bit about what brought you to Peterborough, because I think you both have really unique stories, and I think it would be really interesting to hear some of that to get us started. And that's the format we'll do. We'll probably speak for about half an hour or so, 40 minutes, and then draw you in. But absolutely, if you feel compelled to ask some questions while we're discussing, please join us at any time also. So yeah, maybe Tomas, if you want to go ahead, a little bit about your background and your journey that brings you to Peterborough now 9 years ago. Yeah.
So hello everybody, I'm Tomas Casas, and I'm 19 years old. I just finished high school this past year, and I'm taking a year off working, saving some money to hopefully keep living my dream of racing motorcycles, which is what I do. And like James said, we've been here 9 years with my whole family, and it's been quite the journey, but so far a good one. Originally from Colombia, and we left the country for safety reasons, and we've been able to establish a new life here in Canada, and many new people that we met when we got here who helped us get established and be able to start a new life, because it's not something easy. For myself, I was very lucky. I was a young kid, so all the changes were fairly easy. But yeah, we came here 9 years ago, not knowing what a new life would be like. But fortunately, we had many great people that kind of helped us through that path, and we've been able to establish a new living. Myself with my sport, motorcycle racer. It took us a couple of years before I could recreate that passion. I started off playing soccer and some other sports that helped me integrate into the community. And then over the last few years, I've been able to pick up racing, and I'm now a 4-time national champion. And yeah, it's been a good journey so far.
Great. And Tanya, yeah, go ahead.
I'm Tanya Perras. I'm 15 years old and I'm still in high school. I moved here from Hong Kong when I was 11, and so yeah, we moved here because my dad, he was originally from Peterborough, so we decided it was time to come back. And I spent a lot of my life overseas traveling and being exposed to different parts of the world and cultures and sports. And I played soccer pretty much most of my life in Hong Kong, and I've been able to continue that here in Canada, and it's really been something that helped me fit in with the community, especially in such a new environment, and really help me make friends and get introduced to people.
Great. So, I mean, you guys talk about it really seamlessly coming to Canada and to Peterborough, but you, Hong Kong, Colombia, those are distinct, and they're pretty different from not only Canada but Peterborough itself. So I want you to talk a little bit. We did this the other night too. Talk a little bit about what you knew about Peterborough, and I know the experience is a little different because you'd had a little different exposure to it. What you thought about Peterborough and what you thought about Canada, because I mean, as we saw in the movie, some pretty distinct differences between Somalia and Sweden and Borlänge there. So curious to know what your thoughts were on Canada and as you. From that perspective of childhood also.
Sure. Well, I thought that movie was really powerful to begin with, and I actually didn't know much about Canada when I moved here. I knew nothing at all, but I did know a little bit about Peterborough because we came here every couple summers, but I didn't really know much about the people or what the community was like. I knew one street, like I said, from my grandmother's house that we came to every year, every second year, and not much else besides that. But I've also learned that there's a big difference between where I've been and where I am now, and culture-wise is a big difference, and community-wise definitely. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a huge change for me as well. I was, I think, 9 years old when we were gonna make the change, so I didn't have that much knowledge of the reasoning behind why we were moving. But all I remember is some friends at school talking that they wanted to go to Canada because it's very known for their clean water and for cold winters. So that's pretty much all I knew about Canada. And Peterborough wasn't even in the picture before we came here. So Peterborough, the reason why we came to Peterborough was actually when we were entering Canada and we were getting all the paperwork and everything done. There was a lady who was actually from Colombia working with the government, and my parents, they really wanted an opportunity for the family to start a new living, but very integrated into the Canadian community so that they could learn the language and they could pick up and be able to get started on a new life really quick. So she suggested a program with a sister here in town. Her name's Sister Ruth and Casa Maria, and she let us know that this lady helps immigrants and people getting started in a new life. So that's how we were directed to Peterborough, and she's been pretty much the biggest contribution to our new life here in Canada, and she just opened up her arms like we were family, and we had never met this lady. And so that was one of the amazing things that Canada has, is that they have people that welcome you like that. And we were very fortunate to start in Peterborough. It was very different to what we're used to in Colombia. It's a very loud country, a lot of music on the streets and a lot going on, so definitely a lot quieter than what we're used to back home. But no, we've been able to earn a living here and get used to it, so it's been good so far.
And the water's been clean and it's been pretty cold since you've been here, I would assume, yeah?
Yeah, I still get surprised at the extremes that Canada has, right? Like, I get family back home that think we all live in igloos here, but that's not all the case, right? Like, we have such hot summers, and that was one of the biggest things that surprised me, is how hot of a summer we get. So we get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's great. So you get to Canada, and in your case, Tanya, you'd been before, and then you've been to Peterborough. But once you got here, what changed, and what was different and what was unique about the experience that you maybe hadn't anticipated once you got here? And I know there could be a cascade of things, but maybe a couple things that from both of you, I'd love to hear that. But yeah, Tanya, what was different and what was unique about the experience at first?
Well, first of all, the weather. I thought 18 degrees was really cold. It's not very cold. But also, I think in Hong Kong, it was so diverse, and it is really diverse here, but I was so used to being, it was so international there. I was so used to being just part of that kind of community. But here, where it's not as diverse, I didn't know at first, and when I came here, it was kind of a not so nice surprise that I felt I had to think about my race and how I was different from other people in this community, because I'm half Korean, and it never meant a lot to me before. But coming here, I really started to notice how much a difference it made when I was meeting new people, and because people, maybe they weren't exposed much to this kind of diversity, and it was definitely a new experience.
Great, yeah. And Thomas?
Yeah, I think the biggest barrier was obviously the language. Just because Spanish and English, so that was probably one of the biggest barriers to moving into Canada. But similarly to what Tanya said, it's coming into a new country where, well, for myself, I had no ways of speaking to others in the same language, and it's a different culture, different background, and definitely when I entered school, it was a little different trying to make friends and trying to get to know people, and a lot of people also ask, they wonder where you're from and things about your background, and similarly to what Tanya said, experiencing some racial, like almost stereotypical or kind of people just pinpointing where you are. And I remember into my second elementary that I entered, when I was telling people that I'm from Colombia, first they thought that I was from British Columbia, so they thought I was still from Canada. And then some other people, because British Columbia, I don't know how it came to their mind, but they thought I was British too. So you get just, I think, a little bit of ignorance in some parts, nothing bad to some extent, but I think just, like Tanya said, the difference in diversity in people. Like, Canada is a very diverse place, but Peterborough at the time, 9 years ago, it wasn't that diverse, so people didn't quite know. And I think over the last few years, it's definitely been getting a lot better, getting a lot more people from different places.
Right, I'm going to pick up on that a little bit, because just in reading, Yvonne had been kind enough to pass along the NCC annual report, and so last year, and I imagine a lot of the people here know that, but last year, into Peterborough alone, they helped people from 82 different countries come into Peterborough, and I know at Trent, I was looking at that recently, we're just a shade over 700 international students at Trent. I didn't have a chance to check Fleming, but represented by 110 countries as well. And so I know some people here have been in the community a long time, but I want you to now you've got a perspective. You're wise and veterans in terms of being in Peterborough. How has it changed in that time, and in terms of faces and maybe that cosmopolitan difference, or languages that you're hearing, restaurants, and those things? I'm curious to hear how that's maybe shifted since those long ago elementary days then too.
Well, people were shocked at first, right? Obviously, but I think the more I feel like it went both ways also. The more I became used to it almost, or aware of how they were aware of me, I think the less big of a deal became, because I felt like I was more already involved in the community after elementary, and definitely more involved, and I definitely had friends, so I wasn't new, and not everything was so scary. So it was more comfortable, but I feel like, I don't want to say people are being racist a lot, but I feel like that doesn't really stop as time goes, because still some people aren't as aware. Other people are definitely really good about it, but I still sometimes experience a little bit of it.
Yeah, Thomas.
Yeah, I think because I came so young, that was a huge, made it easy for the transition. Just because when you're a kid, it's a lot easier to make friends and get integrated, and kids are kids, right? So you share and you get along with whatever's there. And I think that really made a huge difference into moving to Canada, because like I said, I was able to make friends, and especially kind of relating to the movie there with sports. Coming from Colombia, my soccer is a huge passion, and that was probably one of the biggest kind of gateways for me to make friends, was just a soccer ball and kids, right? And that's how I was able to make friends and really start to know people and start, getting to know people. And I think that was really huge to actually helping me get established here, because I was able to, from elementary school, move on to high school, knowing people, and it made the transition a lot better, knowing people that you get close to and you become friends with. And over the last few years, I think we've gotten a lot more people from international countries, like it's shown on paper. And for a lot of those kids, I remember being in high school and we get a lot of new kids from other countries, and I think just like the kids in the movie, they're coming in at later stages in their life, in their late teenage years. And I think that's a lot harder of a transition, right? Because you're leaving a lot more memory behind. And I just can't imagine what that's like, especially, some people come without their parents. And yeah, I think definitely, like Tanya said, that at first it's shocking, but I think over the last few years, people get to know a little more about other countries. When I first came here, there weren't too many Colombian families, and now there's a couple more. And when I tell people I'm from there, then they might say, "Oh, I know this person," and then they might know a little bit about your country. So definitely getting to understand other cultures as well.
So maybe we've got a chance to get a little noisier here then with some more Colombians coming too then, right? Yeah. So to Thomas, and I want to hear from both of you then. So obviously you're both really accomplished in various sports. I mean, you've played some at the recreational level, but you've also started to compete at pretty high levels also. So I want to hear a little bit about how sport has contributed to your integration into Canada, into Peterborough specifically, and maybe you can point to some of the ways it's done that. I know, Thomas, the other day you mentioned kind of the universal language almost that sport can bring. So I'd love to hear a little bit of that from both of you. If you want to lead this off, Tanya, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think that when you're playing a sport, you don't have to, your race or where you're from or your language, it doesn't matter. You're focused on that sport and your teammates and working together as a team. And I think that's very important because it brings people together and it shows that it doesn't matter where you're from or what language you speak. It matters, maybe if you can make a good pass or how well you contribute to the team. And I think that's very important because it shows that sport is a universal thing and it's not limited to just one country or one language or one race.
Yeah, adding on to that, definitely. I think sports just brings people together because it's that one same passion that you're driven by. And aside even from race or culture, even if you have barriers just because you don't get along with someone, just because of your different personalities, no matter where you're coming from, you have to work together when you're in a team, right? Because you're working for that same goal, that same objective. And if you don't work as a team, you're never going to accomplish it. So I think that was a huge contribution to me coming here. Like I said, with soccer, I was able to make a lot of friends. And before I actually started racing motorcycles, I played a little bit of rep soccer because it's a lot more affordable. and that was probably where I met the most people and I made the most friends. And it also kind of helped me shape into that athletic build that I like. I'm a very active guy. And I definitely think that, even if it's not sports, just when someone has a passion for something, it doesn't matter where you're from, because you're all going to enjoy doing the same thing, and it can really bring people together.
Great. So I want to link that up now. How sports has maybe contributed in other ways, not just in terms of integration, but other ways here in Canada then, and to your broader experiences maybe as well with friendships, maybe academics, some of your other pastimes. How have those fused together since you've been here then also and integrated even more and more over time?
Well, sports, it keeps you doing something. So every day, or every few days when you go to practice and you're seeing the same people again and again, you start to develop a connection with them, you communicate with them a lot, and you're there for the same goal to win whatever title. And I think that helps a lot because especially when you've just integrated and you're looking to get involved and feel like you belong in a community, it's sports is there for you because you meet so many people, you're doing something with other people, you're doing what you love, and getting good at it, and that also ties in with like other countries. Maybe you've played in other places like I have. I grew up playing in Hong Kong, and I brought what I knew from Hong Kong to where I'm playing now. And yeah, styles are different, but I feel like I can take that because I can take the different knowledge that I've learned and keep going forward to playing soccer.
Yeah, I think it definitely just kind of gives you a focus and a goal, and especially moving into a new country where things are so different, and you might be getting adjusted to the food, the way of living, the weather. It really just helps you keep streamlined and just kind of have that one focus of wanting to get better, training harder. And I think sports in general can really shape a person. I know for myself, it's really built up my confidence, and it's allowed me to, get a lot of attributes from it, like determination, working towards something, work ethics. And I think that relates a lot to society and life. Being able to make connections, share passions, working not only to get better in a sport, but let's say at school, putting in that work ethic I know in school it helped me a lot because I knew that if I wanted to keep on racing, I had to keep my parents happy and get good grades. And I remember also a teacher of mine saying that when she got athletes that took their sport very serious, she also saw that there was results on papers too, just because they were used to putting in that work. And I think over the years that really, give a lot back to racing because it's brought me a lot and it's built me as a person as well.
So the main area that I study academically is the history of childhood and youth, and we've come to certainly learn that all of us learn a lot from our children, whether they're our own or friends and otherwise. I want you to talk a little bit about what you maybe meant to your family and siblings and how you helped them with the process of coming here as a youngster, because I'm sure you can think of ways that happened, but curious to hear maybe how you helped in their education maybe and in their transition to here, because it wasn't just you doing that, it was a group that had to come. So curious to hear about that.
Well, I think I was a very big part in trying to persuade my parents to come to Canada. So thank you. I think it was really hard coming here and trying to settle down and trying to get involved and part of the community, and they helped us a lot. But I want to say that maybe them being, because me and my sister, we play sports and we're always involved, and I think them maybe bringing us to our activities or being there for us and supporting us, I think we've also helped them maybe like get maybe a little more involved in the community, like coming to our games or meeting other parents, and yeah.
Tomas?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, big thank you to my family as well, because they're the ones that, push us towards actually working on something, putting us in a sport. And the way I think we give back, especially for a new family coming into Canada, was the language barrier for my parents. And my little sister, she danced for a couple years, and then my dad obviously with racing. I think coming to those events and looking to get signed up, having those interactions of the process of getting your kid signed up, and going to these events. My sister with dancing was mainly my mom, and she eventually was able to practice her English, make some mom friends, as you would say. And then my dad, with motorcycle passion at the racetrack, he's able to make connections that way. And, that helps them also keep their mind a little bit more focused rather than just all work and trying to provide for your kids, but also give them a little bit of time to distress.
Yeah, that's great. So, I don't want to dwell on anything negative, but absolutely curious about aspects of that. And Tanya, you've alluded to a little bit, and so did you, Thomas, too. But and it sounds like that you believe things have changed over time, but I want to hear about at least an anecdote or something about when you first get here, or maybe it's been more recent too, and it's something you experienced that was really tough, and maybe something that people might not be aware of in the community or something that way also, but curious maybe a challenge or struggle that you had to overcome based on being a newcomer to here.
Well, when I first asked to come to Canada, I really begged for it. I think my dad, we had a conversation, and he mentioned to me that Peterborough wasn't as diverse as Hong Kong, and I definitely might experience a little bit of racism. And so I took that as an 11-year-old, and I expected maybe a bully to come up to me and say something. So I had all these comebacks ready. But what I actually experienced was something quite different. I think, and definitely there were a lot of people that really helped me fit in and were welcoming and weren't racist, but I did experience some. And it was more subtle than I would have thought it would have been. Because people in Canada were very polite, and so I don't think many people would say anything to my face. But I kind of, you have a feeling like maybe some they're whispering, or they're pointing, or they're looking at you different, and it's not something you can defend yourself with because you can't go up to them and say, "Why are you whispering about me?" So I think it's something that really played in my mind because I didn't know how to respond to that, because I've never looked at myself and thought, oh, I'm half Asian. I've always thought of myself, I never thought of myself as that. And I think a lot of people, that's how they labeled me. They put a label on me when I came here. And I think that's something people need to be more aware about.
Great, thanks. And Thomas, yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes people kind of see you not for who you are, but where you come from sometimes, and they put in labels, and they can also be stereotypical. Some of the shocking things I experienced coming into Canada, and I don't see it as much too often anymore, but still now and then I'll get comments. But coming from Colombia, a country that's well known for its past and drug trafficking and all, I've got, comments about, oh, you're from Colombia, cocaine and, drug lords and stuff like that. And, Colombia is a very beautiful country, and it has a lot to offer aside from the negative things that has made the country famous. And I think people just sometimes don't realize that that's not the way you should approach someone, especially when they're from a country that's known for negative things. And aside from that, I've also experienced things like go back to where you come from. And being from South America, a lot of people relate South Americans to just Mexico and Mexicans. And Mexicans, they have a bit of a reputation too in some way that, there's many illegal immigrants and stuff like that. But we're not all like that, right? And not even all Mexicans are like that. But yeah, people just assume that because you're from South America, you're Mexican. And then, I had people come and say, do you speak Mexican? And then the way I would answer is like, do you speak Canadian, right? And I think it just comes back to, learning a little bit more outside your comfort zone and getting to know other cultures as well. But yeah, definitely just people need to be sometimes a little more aware that, there's greater things out there, and there's a lot more different cultures.
So yeah, that's really good. I want to build on that a little bit then, and we often focus on what you've learned and what people have given you, but I'm very curious about maybe examples in school or with friends or somewhere else where you've done some educating and maybe helped reduce the level of ignorance, and I mean that in the best sense of the word, in some people, and how you've contributed that way. I know, Tanya, you mentioned that St. Pete's, for instance, right now, there's not a lot of people that identify as Asian, for instance. So I'm just curious if there's been moments where you've put people maybe into a different mindset or frame of mind with educating them also.
Yeah, definitely. Like Thomas said, there's a lot of stereotypes, and I've gotten a lot of, oh, that's an Asian language. Tanya, can you read it? Or like if something's like written in some weird scrawl and they found on Google, oh, Tanya, can you read that? Well, no, I can't read that actually. I can only read English. That's probably not a good thing, but and also I haven't done like I feel like if I'm educating, it's like common sense almost. And I don't mean to be rude to people, but I feel like some people just need to be aware of that. Like at school, they'll be like, oh yeah, Tanya, you're Chinese. I'm half Korean. But they're like, oh, it's same difference. So I think people just need to, they need to think before they speak or educate themselves a little more on just different places in the world outside of Canada before they make comments or put people down, because I have seen it, even if it's just not me, it's about other people. And I try to step in, but it's hard when people want to laugh and not listen to you, because they think their opinion maybe is different. So.
Great. Thomas here.
Yeah, I think it's also important just to be honest and straight up with people that say comments like that. Like I remember when people said, go back to where you come from or whatnot, that they don't realize that most likely their family came to Canada as immigrants at one point, because unfortunately, there's not as many Native people now. You still see a lot, but the majority of people that identify as Canadian are people who immigrated years ago. So I think it comes back to just being aware that people can't just say these things to other immigrants trying to start a new life, because at one point their family did that, looking for a better living. And as far as with the rude comments I've gotten about my country or whatnot, now that when you explain to friends, because even sometimes friends will say comments like that, and here and there it's a little bit okay because they're your friends, but sometimes when they go a little too far, you have to explain to some friends the reasoning about the negative benefits or negative impacts that drugs and trafficking has had on our country. And then in the past, that just giving them that inside knowledge, they've actually backed me up when someone else did a comment once at school, just, hey, that's not okay, right? So I think it's just, being honest and telling people.
So you haven't had to lecture per se, but more just, having them check themselves almost and do that, Well, I don't want to take a few questions from the audience, but a couple of more things I wanted to make sure I got in also. So sport has obviously been a huge part of both of your experiences here, and I want you to talk a little bit about the people that have made that happen, maybe coaches or other influences that way, and or people that have managed or like I say, in any way kind of contributed to the sporting experience, and what that has meant, and maybe what they might have done to somewhat take into account at least the fact that you were newcomers to Peterborough and to Canada.
Well, thank you, Jim. I actually do want to say thank you, because when I first came here, I started off playing house league soccer because I think I was a little nervous to try to join a rep team that had girls playing on a team for quite a few years, and I was new and I wasn't sure where my level was at compared to them. And Jimmy really made me feel welcome, and I wanted to say thank you, because I think the first year I lost a lot of confidence, and it wasn't the greatest start I had, but I feel like my confidence is starting to come back, and I'm feeling more comfortable playing and being a part of that team, which is definitely something that's better than it was before. And I think when you move from one part of the world to another where they played a sport maybe a little differently, it's hard to fit in and feel like maybe what you think you're doing is right or good or improving your team.
I I wasn't expecting that, but thank you, Tanya. Tomas, go ahead also.
Well, the first experiences for me were with soccer, because I didn't go straight into motorcycle racing. And I think one of the biggest things that really allowed me to, make connections is that the coach would have almost like team parties in a way, so that there you were able to, take things a little bit outside the field too and get to know the other players more on a personal level. And I think that was a pretty good way to be able to have the kids connect with each other. But aside from that, aside from my parents, obviously their huge contribution and sacrifice to the sport, there's a huge thank you to the people that allowed us to begin here, like Sister Ruth, and then my dad's work, Peterborough Cycle Salvage. They were a huge contribution to my racing career. And the way I started racing here was, with Dad, we showed up to a regional event once, and the guy who runs the series, he doesn't speak Spanish, and at the time we didn't speak very much Spanish. I spoke a little more than Dad did, and he helped us figure out a way to get started, and he contacted us with another family that was racing, but they were from the Dominican, so they had the Spanish obviously with them, and then with them we were able to create like a racing family. So to this day we're still together, and this was 6 years or so ago. And with them and another Canadian family in the racing community, they lent me a bike, suit, all the equipment to get started, and I started just with boring stuff from them, and I was able to every year get a little more help. Another local magazine here, trackdayhop.com, he was probably one of the first almost managers, kind of people that the owner of the magazine went around town asking companies and stores see if they would support me. And adding on to what I'm going to be discussing, I think Peterborough also has such a great program, not just Peterborough, but in Canada in general, but I really see it in Peterborough, is that a lot of stores and companies contribute a lot to sports in the community, and they give back to the community that way, which I think is fabulous. And yeah, continuing with my racing success, every year I started boring stuff, and then people would come and give a hand, and I would get to know other people, and they would come and give a hand, and then I was able to create connections, friendships, and then sponsorships. And then throughout the past few years, I've been able to rise up to the top, and hopefully I'll be continuing to racing as a professional, as a career someday.
Excellent, yeah. So one more before, I'm sure there's going to be some questions from the audience too, but I don't want to neglect this one. So if I ask you now where home is, where's home for you? What do you say and why?
That's a really hard one, because when I have been asked that question before, and people normally ask you, what's your favorite place? What do you like better? And I can never answer that, because they're so different.
You have to.
Yeah. When I was in Hong Kong, I was young, obviously, but it was I would live there for 10 years of my life. I grew up there, and when I think of home, I do think of where I lived, Discovery Bay, Hong Kong. I think of all the memories I have, my friends there. But when I think of my future, I think of here in Canada, finishing school, and obviously. But I don't know. I want to say Hong Kong, because probably the greatest moments of my life have been there, traveling the world, just so much culture, so much experience, and I think you can't trade that for anything.
Great. Thomas?
Well, I consider Canada my home. It's unfortunately I haven't been back to Colombia since we moved here, and I consider that my original home. Whenever I'll say to people, I go back home, I want to go back home someday. But I think I've established my living here in Canada, and most of the things I've built as an adult, as a teenager, more of a conscious mind, I've been able to create it all here in Canada. And I think I can definitely say that I consider Canada my home. But I also believe that you make home anywhere, right? It doesn't have to be your house, it doesn't have to be a city, a country. It's just a place where you're with people and you make it belong to you. I consider Peterborough my home, but then whenever I'm at the racetrack, I consider that my home as well. So I think it comes together with who you're around, and that's why you make home.
Great. So yeah, questions that people might have out in the audience as well. We've got a few minutes to take those, so we'd love to hear from anyone who might want to ask Thomas or Tanya any questions. Yeah, right here in the front. Yeah.
Thomas, you came not speaking English. I was thinking in the movie, that was a town smaller than Peterborough, and there were 3,000 Somalis there. Presumably all came not speaking English. It gives you a community, but it's not the community too. Do you think if 3,000 Colombians had come at the same time, it would have been harder or easier for you in the long term?
I think it would have been a lot harder. Not so much for me, but I think for my parents. The reason why we ended up choosing Peterborough is because the lady who we met when we were moving into Canada, my parents explained to her that they wanted to be able to get integrated into the community and be able to learn the language and speed up the process. And I think that definitely made a huge difference because you're almost forced to, right? Humans are made for survival and finding the easiest way to get used to things. And I think having that pressure to learn the language so that you could actually start going places, being able to do purchases, I think that made a huge difference because like we even know some family that they moved into Toronto. I have an aunt that lived here a couple years before us, and my parents speak better English than she does because she just surrounds herself too much with Latin American people, and that makes it harder for her to practice the language.
What do you think about the community reaction? Do you have any sense of would it have been, would you have been less welcome if there were 3,000 of you or not?
That's a hard question to answer, but I think it all depends on. I think it might have been just because it would have been a big change to the community, especially because when we came, there wasn't too much diversity in Peterborough. So I think that would have been a huge shock for everybody, and I think it might have been a little bit harder to get accepted.
Yeah, those are great questions. Yeah, up at the top there, go right ahead.
I'm here for the Arthur, and much like you guys, I moved here when I was 9. I moved to Mississauga though, not here. So I definitely, understand and kind of sympathize with you guys. But just for my own kind of curiosity, just because I struggled with this when I moved here as well, I moved from Nigeria. What do you guys think with the idea of assimilation? Because I know that, especially when you come from a very particular culture, your home life is very different from what you live outside of home. Number one for me, biggest thing I would say was that I had to practice what I would call a Canadian accent, where at home I spoke a certain way, and outside I spoke a certain way. So when I had friends over, there was always this kind of culture clash or culture like pulling and pushing. And if friends were gonna come over, I had to like school them first of like, you have to do this and have to do this, otherwise you're not gonna be welcome back. And it wasn't like anything negative, it was just like a culture thing, where there's certain things that I know in my culture is disrespectful, and I had to, ask them too, like, if I'm going to your place, what are some of the things that, your parents would like me to do or that you would like me to do, right? So did you guys experience that? Did you notice that much of a cultural difference? And what do you think about assimilation? How much do you expect, someone else coming in from Colombia or from Hong Kong? How much do you think you're supposed to hold on to your culture? And how much are you supposed to accept the new culture, especially if they're contradicting?
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, so kind of the performative nature almost of when you're coming into, yeah, that's great. Go ahead, either.
I can definitely relate to that because when I moved here, I did have an accent. I had a British accent actually because I went to an English school. I was surrounded by people from England all day long. My teachers were from England. And so I had a full-on British accent, and I think that was one of the things that was really difficult to try to fit in with my peers because I'm from Asia and I have a British accent, and people found that a little weird. But yeah, I definitely had like a group of girls like come to me like first day, and I eventually did lose accent, obviously, but I did feel like I had to behave a certain way because I did behave how I used to behave in Hong Kong, and I would get like weird comments or weird looks because I'd call, like, for example, a hallway was a corridor, and I always said corridor, and my friends would laugh at me, so now I say hallway. But just little habits I used to have, they're gone, and I'm a little sad because they were a part of who I am. Like, I grew up like talking that way and acting that way, and Canada's definitely changed that. And you asked if I should have held on to something, but I don't think it was something I could have controlled. I felt like being in that environment kind of makes you like everyone else almost. Like, you kind of adapt.
Thomas?
Yeah, I think it's hard coming into a new culture and trying to keep your own culture, because if everyone else is different, everyone else's culture is different than yours, then it's a lot harder to strive for your own ways. But I think, you know, coming, like, as far as language goes, I remember someone asking me to try to do a Canadian accent as we were having a conversation, and I just replied to them, this isn't me trying to make a Canadian accent, but that's just me speaking English, right? Like, if you're young, you can easily lose that accent, but if you learn at an older age, it's harder to lose. And over the years, I've had people say that, you know, they don't notice my accent as much, but here and now, you can probably still notice it. But no, I think for me, I'm very proud of where I come from, and my parents, obviously, they're very Colombian. So we still do a lot of Colombian routines, and like the way we celebrate some holidays are slightly different than the way people here in Canada celebrate it. So when it comes to traditional things, that part of my culture is still there. And, you know, like with music, I listen to both English music, but I also listen and love Spanish music. So I think there's a way that you can have both cultures collide and, you know, maybe introduce friends to your culture, some of the things of it. But I think for sure, in a process of moving to a new country, you do lose a little bit of your culture, maybe not entirely all of it, but just as far as the way of living and communicating with everyone, and the things that the part of the culture that's done as a big community, some of that is lost just because obviously you're with a different culture. But I definitely think that you can maintain and experience both cultures at the same time.
Well, you must have lost the accent a little bit if you're being accused of being a British Colombian in elementary school a little bit too, Thomas. But yeah, so I think we're at the end of our time. Yeah, so first, want to really have a thank you to both Tanya and to Thomas for joining us this evening and sharing with us. I mean, that in combination with the movie, I think gives us a lot to ponder and think about too. So thank you to both of you. And of course, thank you to everyone else, and again to Yvonne and Zabibas here. I know that she was integral in having me join this evening, and so very thankful to be able to contribute in a small way today also to that. So thank you, and hope you continue to support the New Canadian Centre, and I know they've got a lot of exciting things coming up. Their calendar of events is always full, so thank you again to everybody.